Good morning. I'm excited to be here. So I'm going to ask a lot of questions today, so I want to start out and just everybody raise your hand for me. Come on, raise your hand, everybody. You raise both hands. No, just kidding. So leave your hand up, leave your hand up. So how many people have read The Phoenix Project by Gene Kim? So most of us. And so you can put your hands down. And so for me, The Phoenix Project really embodies why I'm here. And I was really excited because I was like, how did Gene get inside my head? How did he know? How did he know about the problems that I was having in a large organization? And how did he come up with a solution to actually fix that? And I was super excited when I read that last year. And the reason I'm excited to be here today is I think we all have the same problem. That was my big aha. It wasn't just me. Software, IT, it's getting harder. It's getting more complex. But there's a solution, right? And I think that's what's exciting about ChefConf. Chef's a great tool, and hopefully you guys have seen a lot of great chef tool presentations. But more importantly, how do we make software better? If you think about it from the CFO perspective, IT is the only place where you can make a huge investment and maybe not get a return. How many of you invested in huge ERP systems, $30 million, $40 million projects, only to have the same problems you had before? This is the problem that we have to solve, the people in this room. And so today I'm going to talk a little bit about our journey at Target. We're on year 2 of trying to do some things better. The framework that we're calling is service management. And basically what service management is, how do you deliver services better, faster, and without a whole lot of help from an IT person? Let's make services self-help as much as we can. And Chef definitely plays a role in that. So a little bit about me. I love to learn. Right, and I've gone to a lot of universities. Some of them I have degrees from. Some of them I just went for a little while. I've been informed by my wife if I decide to go to university again, I might need a new family. So I'm here instead because I'm hoping to learn from everybody in this room, and I feel like that's something we all have in common. We're all here because we want to learn, we want to get better. We feel like sharing our ideas at a place like ChefConf is a great way to do that. And so how many people here, raise your hand, have only been a developer? So we got a few. So I can save you, I've spent about half my career as a developer and half as an operations guy. And I can tell a little story, I think, that'll give you a little insight into the developer mind. First of all, many years ago when I went to my first Jimmy John's, I was super impressed with the efficiency of Jimmy John's. I could not believe how many people they could run through a lunch line. I just sat out there and counted. Jimmy John's could run 4 times the amount of people through than a Subway. The efficiency was just mind-boggling. And I was super excited about that. And that gives you a little insight into an ops. But how many of us have been in an elevator and thought there's got to be a better way? Yeah, you've seen the guy press the button. You're like, really, that floor? Or you see somebody get in the elevator across from you, and then you get on the floor only to watch them leave ahead of you. Yeah, I've been there, right? And an operations guy, you're going, there's got to be a better way. Well, it turns out there is. So we got these new fancy elevators. I don't know, has anybody seen these new elevators? Yeah, so we just got a new building at Target for some of our IT staff. And basically what you do is you punch in your floor before you get on the elevator. Really slick, right? So now the algorithm optimizes it. It says, hey, you're going to floor 8. Joe over there is going to floor 8. Kim's going to floor 8. You should all get in elevator C. Works really slick, right? This is the operations mind. You have perfect information. The trouble is, when you get in the elevator, no buttons. What if I didn't want to go to 8? I got in there like, shoot, I wanted to go to 6. So this is the dev mind. As a developer, you don't have perfect information. Things change. And I think the elevator story is a great kind of example of the push and pull between operations and development. And so I think that story gives you a little bit of a background in terms of where I want to go today. So as we all know, finished products look great. And for hopefully you recognize I'm in this picture. This is a picture of my family. It's a great picture, right? What you don't know is it took us 150 tries to get this one picture. That's right, 150 tries. Now, if you had 4 boys, maybe not a big surprise that it took that many tries. But finished products look great, right? And we've all seen a lot of really cool presentations. How many people saw the Docker presentation? I mean, wow, blew my mind. I mean, how many of you have waited to run tests? I used to run my tests, go to lunch, come back, hopefully they'd be done. Docker, if it works as advertised, has a lot of potential to speed a lot of things like that up. Instantaneously being able to clone a container, That's super exciting to me. And that's just one of the examples of some of the great innovation that's happening here at ChefConf and why I'm super excited to be here sharing. So getting back to the story, if you're driving innovation, and what I'm going to talk about is innovation in a large company today, you can expect there's going to be some challenges along the way. And so I hope to give you a few tips of what to expect. We're in year 2 of our journey. We're just getting started. And you're going to find that you're going to make some mistakes. You might look in the wrong place. You might bring in the wrong tool. You might bring in a tool instead of solving a culture problem. That's okay. The important thing is to recognize that and to change direction as quickly as possible. You're also going to find some sadness along the way. How many people here are runners? How many have bike long distances? Raise your hand. How many have swam or do CrossFit or weightlifting or any of those things? So we got about half the room, right? The challenge with all those things is no matter how good you get at running, at some point you want to quit. It takes energy, it takes effort to actually run and to finish. Driving innovation is very much the same way. You're gonna have some messiness along the way. You're gonna want to quit, but you got to be able to persevere and plow through. The other thing is you're gonna run into some messes along the way, and they're not gonna be messes you created. I don't know how many times as a developer I was like, I cannot believe the person that wrote this before. And then I would look up in the comments and see programmed by Jeff Einhorn. And I was like, God, that guy is an idiot. So you got to be willing to go outside your comfort zone and clean up something that maybe you did make. The last thing that you need to be ready to do is maybe do things that you didn't sign up to do. In my case, 10:30 at night, I get, Dad, the toilet won't flush. And after plunging vigorously, I'm like, I don't know what's in there, but it ain't coming out. And the cost of getting a plumber on a Saturday night at 10:30, significant, right? And I'm cheap. So I'll take the toilet off and see what happens. Good news is I got the bath toy out that was perfectly sized to not go down, but to clog. The bad news is I couldn't quite get the toilet back on. So lucky for me, I have a handy brother-in-law, and he was willing to come over and help me out. But really, this is really similar for us. Whether you're a dev person and for the first time you need to care about servers and networks, or you're an infrastructure person and you need to learn how to do development. You got to use source code repositories. You're going to write tests. You need to be ready to get outside your comfort zone and do something new. Because let's face it, you're not these guys, right? As much as we like to be a superhero and fly in with your cool new belt with Chef on it and Git and OpenStack, there's a lot of hard work that has to be done. And for most of us in this room, your organizations hopefully are making money. And so you have to be careful. You want to make change, but you can't disrupt what's going on. And so today I'm going to talk a little bit about a framework of how we're approaching the problem. And I think the framework helps not so much as something that you would go out and use and copy, but as a way to kind of help understand and drive the discussion today. And so really, there's a few things to think about, really. Every environment is different. So first, you need to understand your environment. What is the problem you're trying to solve? It sounds simple, but just being able to really clarify that. Adam talked about having a clear mission. What are we going after? You need to pitch a solution, and yes, that means you probably have to have a business case if you want any kind of executive support. And finally, you got to socialize what you're doing. Transparency, transparency, transparency. Adam talked about it when I was talking with Justin Arbuckle. He also talked about it. Anything you can do to bring more visibility to what you're doing. Your innovation isn't a secret, isn't a surprise. You want people engaged. Film your product, share that. Anything you can do to get the word out is going to be a huge help. And so for us, what we're dealing with at the company I work at is we're a profitable company. That's great news, right? The challenge is operations costs continue to grow. So how are we going to solve that, right? With this growth, infrastructure is continuing to get more and more expensive. Well, it seems simple, right? We're going to automate some infrastructure and we'll drive costs down. And to do that, we're going to save some money. Now, meaningful change takes time. A lot of you folks in this room are super smart. You could go and probably automate the software stack maybe in a few weeks if you already had Chef experience. For us, it took us about a quarter to get folks up to speed and automate. But if you want a solution to actually stick and to really last at a company, you need to do a whole lot of other things. You got to be out there pitching your idea, socializing it. You want to get buy-in from senior leaders so they know what's going on. And then finally, you got to plan for success. What do you do if this all works out? How do you roll it out into the organization? And then, oh, by the way, there's this small thing of what if you bring in new tools to your organization? How many of you tried to bring a new tool into an enterprise before? Yeah, how does that experience go for you? Yeah, it takes a long time. It's painful. I'm a little ADD. I like to walk around, as you can see up here. Bringing a new tool almost killed me, right? It takes 3/4 to bring in a new tool because you have to get lawyers involved, you have to sign MSAs. It's all for good reasons, right? Because these tools will be along for a long time. But if you're a developer, or you're even on the business and you got to roll a feature out, you need to move quickly. And the good news is, a lot of these tools have cloud options, and that can help you. And I'll talk more about that. And so I'll give you a little example. So at Target, guests first, right? We're looking to delight our guests, just like Barry talked about in his kickoff. We're a profitable company. And so luckily, we've been around for 50 years, and that comes with a lot of cool stuff. It also comes with a lot of baggage. The other thing is we have a huge IT environment. Because we're so big, because we support such a number of stores and distribution centers, we've had to have a lot of technology people. The other thing we're seeing is our business is changing really rapidly, right? We have some tough competitors. And if you don't innovate and continue to evolve in retail, you'll die. I mean, you look at the Sears, you look at Montgomery Ward's, JCPenney is struggling now. You can't sit still. If you take a closer look at our IT environment, this is just a representative graph, and I think a lot of it, Fortune 50 companies or 500 companies have the same challenge. Your technology spend grows over time. And when you start out, hopefully you have lots of budget, right? And you bring in some new tools and you don't worry about that because you don't have any existing tools you have to support. The reality is, as development brings in new tools and they move over to operations to support, that pink bar turns into a green bar and your costs go up. So if you can remember this graph, I'm gonna reference it later, but you get the gist of it, right? Over time, more and more costs go up. Eventually, you don't have any money left to buy new technology. As an operations group, you look to development and you're like, well, we can either stop supporting the stuff we already own, or you can not bring in anything new. And so how do we address that problem before you get to critical mass? And so for us, a good step is you need to be able to visualize the problem. And so hopefully you've heard a little bit, I think Jazz talked about systems thinking, but at the end of the day is, how do you look at the problem and actually draw a picture? And what you'll find is if you're able to put a picture in front of people, most people will say, yeah, that doesn't make sense. We got to fix that. And so here's an example. It's just a representation. But what you'll see is what you'll find in most of the organizations is most of the time is spent waiting and not working. Not a big shock, right? You know, when you start, you have maybe one IT person when you're a small company, and they can do all these things. They can do storage, they can do networking, maybe even doing a little development for you. But as your companies grow, you know, maybe you add a network person, then maybe you add a developer. Now all of a sudden, you start having to have handoffs. So now the server person needs to build a server and hand it off to the developer, and the network person is involved in configuring that, maybe opening up some ports. And in a large company, this continues to get more and more complicated as you build more and more of these silos. And so it becomes really important, and what a lot of people in this room are trying to do is to take a step back and actually paint that picture. Where are we actually working? Where are we actually waiting? And so the good news is this isn't a new problem, right? We got that from Gene Kim. Jez has talked about that. A lot of things in lean thinking and DevOps have already been done and can be applied. Lean thinking is one example of a great book out there that kind of gives you that foundation of what lean is and what process improvement looks like. Needing to be able to visualize your problem, systems thinking. This is another great book that's been recommended. Rob Cummings has recommended it as well. Learning to see can help you visualize the problem you're having. The Toyota Way gives you a lot of the theory. This is where a lot of this stuff started back in the 80s. So a lot of work's been done there. Six Sigma, Lean. There's a lot of cool tools out there that you can use, and your organization's different than our organization. Don't be afraid to try different things. I think the important thing is develop a way to talk about the problem, to visualize the problem, and then use what works for you in your organization. And so for us, it seems simple, right? We talked about it. We're going to automate everything, right? It sounds nice. The challenge with that is automation is development, and it takes concerted effort. And so you need to be a way to talk about that, because as soon as you talk about a concerted effort in a large organization, you need to be able to figure out, how am I going to pay for that? How do I justify the resources? Why would I automate X, Y, Z instead of A, B, C? And so for us, what helped is to have a directional way to talk about things in terms of what is it actually going to cost to automate it? Is the juice worth the squeeze in this case? And it's a real simple solution, right? Total savings is going to equal the automation savings times the number of deployments minus the cost to automate. And you're going to get a lot of feedback when you bring these things up in terms of, well, that doesn't necessarily capture what we're trying to talk about. And I think the important thing here is to be directionally correct. It doesn't need to be perfect. And so here's an example we made up. But what you can see is this particular application, if we wanted to automate it, it would cost us about $250,000 in labor. And every company's got a different number for labor. You can plug in your number. And based on if we deploy that 200 times, which for those of you in this room, deployment is often underestimated. 200 times, I guess if you say 200, you're probably actually going to do it 400 times. You can see that this makes a lot of sense, right? This is a no-brainer. You can put this in front of any executive and you're like, that makes a lot of sense. We should take on this work. But essentially what you're saying is we need to invest more early in order to get lower costs longer term. And this can be a tough sell, especially with development teams that have really tight timelines. You're trying to convince them to put a little bit more upfront work into automating something with the long-term expectation that it's going to make costs lower for you. And so you need to have those conversations early. You need to be very transparent. But the beauty is that ultimately it's in their best interest to think long-term, because if you're able to drive down those operations costs for you supporting it, that creates more money for development to go out and bring in new technologies and new tools. This is DevOps. This is where you have to work together. And so one of the challenges when you start out in this journey is, how do you estimate how long this stuff's going to take? And it varies from industry to industry. And it depends on your experience. What do you have experience in? What tools are you using? This is a realistic example that we use in our organization, having had no experience with Chef, very little experience in infrastructure as code. We have some very savvy people in the room now that after the presentation, you maybe get a chance to talk to some other folks from Target that have actually done this work. But they were able to lay out, this is the amount of labor it took to actually automate this particular application. Now, this is really cool because I think this is a place where you can leverage some help from Chef consultants, from maybe third-party consulting firms. You can talk to people that have done this, and they can bring in folks to help you estimate how much work is this. In addition, this should get easier over time, right? When we started out, we didn't have a Red Hat cookbook. Now we have one, right? You shouldn't have to rewrite that again, or hopefully if you do, you make some minor changes to it. Over time, your automation costs should go down as you continue to get more and more reuse. And so it's going to become important to how do you make that available for your community and your organization so that developers can find that and you can create that easy button, that fast path, so you can reuse instead of redo. So how many people in this room have all the talent they need on their team? Now, if you're sitting next to your boss, you should raise your hand. Okay. I think the short answer is no, right? You could always use more talent. And how many people have tried to actually go out there and recruit talent in the marketplace? How easy is that right now to find a good automation engineer? It's not. You guys are in demand, big time. And so for us, we had trouble too. We couldn't find talent. And so we had to figure out a different way. And I think the good news is you probably already have the talent you need in a large organization. We're lucky. We're a big organization. We have lots of smart people. They weren't familiar necessarily with the tool set we were trying to use, but we just had to find the people who had the right interests. And so social media was a huge shock for me as a way to really flatten the organization and find the folks that are actually interested in automation. We were able to find people in development, people in operations, people in our engineering teams, and connect those folks that had similar interests and give them something really cool to work on. And ask questions. What do you need? What do you need to get better? This was huge. Now, we did need a little help because we were starting out. But the good news is we didn't need a ton of help. We didn't need to bring in a consultant for a year and go back and forth with them. We were able to maybe have 100 hours of consulting time from the folks at Chef. And despite being Target, we couldn't get Adam Jacob to come out. We tried very hard. But they were able to send us other experts out. And they were really good. And they were good in the sense of helping us help ourselves. It wasn't a typical consulting engagement where they're coming in and they're looking to be there for the long term. They were coming in and they were looking like, how do we get you guys up to speed so you can be self-sufficient? And I think for us, that's really powerful because the advantage of using your own people is they already understand the swamp that you have of technology. They already get how that stuff works. There isn't a huge learning curve. And so this talk is targeted a little bit more at leaders and managers to kind of help their leaders be successful. And you think, well, this is easy, right? We're going to automate some stuff. We'll turn it over to engineers, and they'll take care of it. My job as a leader is done. Absolutely not. You got a lot of work to do. As a leader, you better be out there socializing. You better be talking to your peers, because they're going to be like, what are you doing? What are you doing automating my silo? You got to be really transparent. You got to be out there talking to them. You got to be talking about, what if this works out? What if we automate your silo? What happens next? You got to get them engaged in the process if you can. Finally, you're probably going to make some mistakes along the way. We already discussed that. You want to keep your leaders informed as well, right? So you don't want to surprise your boss and be like, hey, you know, I bought this tool, it didn't work, I need some more money, and this is why. Because he's going to ask you a bunch of questions, and it's going to take a long time. But if you can keep him or her in the loop as you go, then when you need something, they'll be ready to help you. Finally, if you're at a big organization, likely other people are thinking about this stuff too. How do you connect with those folks? How do you create some economies of scale? Hey, you already got a Red Hat cookbook? Great, I got this JBoss cookbook. Let's combine them. We can both move faster. Reach out to those thought leaders. That's a huge asset. And so no technology presentation would be complete without a slide on a technology stack. And so what we have here is a real simple stack. There's a lot of other tools that we're using at Target. I'm not the expert. I'd encourage you to talk to Jason Walker, Jacob McCann, some of the folks that have done a lot of the heavy lifting at Target. And what you'll see here, though, is an easy place to start, because you have to walk before you can run. And so for us, we needed 3 components. We needed infrastructure that you could actually program. And so for that, we chose OpenStack. And the reason we were excited about OpenStack is it provided us the opportunity to leverage OpenStack in the public cloud and also internally in a private cloud. We landed on Chef. And I'd like to say that we did a deep analysis on Chef is the right tool for us. And the reality is that we already had some Chef going on in an organization. And the thought was, if we're already using Chef and we can get decent licensing, why add yet another tool to do automation? And so for us, that was a really easy choice. Chef was going to do what we needed. We already had it in-house. Let's continue to go down that path. And finally, GitHub Enterprise. And very similar story with GitHub. We were using it, and it works really great with Chef. And so we just went down that path as why make things harder than they need to be. So you need to go fast. We talked about that. Almost a year to bring in these tools. What are you going to do? You can't have your development team just sitting around. And that's the great thing about all these tools, right? They all had public cloud versions. There's public Git, there's public Chef, there's public OpenStack. And so you're able to get the development teams going really quickly. The infrastructure folks could go out there, they could practice stuff without live data, become comfortable with the tools, and get going before you had the infrastructure stood up in-house. And so for us, this is a great way to move quickly. The reality is that we're not a public cloud company, though. Security is very real. There's bad people out there every day trying to break into your systems. And so for us, at the end of the day, when we decided to have an enterprise deployment, we're going to do it internally. Not to say that the public cloud isn't going to be a place we go someday, but it feels like the tools around securing and managing that are still immature from our perspective. We haven't made that investment. It's great to see companies like Netflix doing that, and I'm optimistic that hopefully in a few years that they'll have more readily available tools where it'll be very easy to do those things in the public cloud. But for now, we decided to keep things internal. And so what does success look like? And hopefully you've seen lots of success stories over the last couple of days. But what I'd like to leave you with is a story that maybe is a little less numbers driven, is more of an experience story. And so at Target, we have 2 project managers I recently had a chance to work with, and I had to hear their stories, and we'll call them Dave and Brad. And they've both been project managers at Target for a long time. And basically their job is to navigate this swamp of technology, to make sure things happen and move between the silos. Hopefully automation will make that a whole lot easier, maybe eliminate that need. But Dave, you talk to Dave, he's all smiles. So he's working on this new project that's using our new end-to-end automation pilot. And he has nothing but good things to say. He talks a little bit about, development didn't give us quite the right requirements. We had to rebuild some environments. But everything was automated, and they rebuild them really quick. No problem, right? It's not a big deal. Now, Brad, on the other hand, he's not all smiles, right? Brad's looking pretty beat down. He's like, I don't know if this stuff's going to work. I don't know if we're going to make our timelines in production. Development hasn't given us some of the requirements. We had to go back and rebuild a few environments. They didn't quite get rebuilt right. We got to go back and get a few more of them. And Brad, he's been a project manager for a long time. And so he understands that because he's seeing those things in the dev environment, he's likely to see him in stage and prod. And so he's not excited. And so really for me, to see the smile on Dave's face was my aha. And it was finally to say, this is awesome, right? This is working. And so hopefully we'll have more stories like that at Target. But I think that story gives you a little bit of insight into what we see and what you might expect if things actually start working. So in the future, what is this going to look like? For us, we started a pilot last year where we had a couple initiatives going on. We had a lot of great success. And I remember when I started as a leader, I asked my boss, well, how do I know if I'm successful outside of you telling me? He's like, you don't have to ask. All you need to do is look around. If you're successful, it'll catch on. And for us, automation has been very much the case. It's caught on big time. We got a half a dozen initiatives going on this year, and I would expect that we'll have twice that many next year. It's working. We got teams in India. We got teams out here in San Francisco using it. We got multiple teams in headquarters. We're in .com. We're looking to start something in distribution. Just a lot of excitement around automation because people see the benefits it's going to provide. And so you need to plan for success. And so I like this picture because this is a picture of my younger sons. And they really like Nutella, but they did not plan for success. So being the naive dad, I gave them the Nutella. They made a mess. They will not get Nutella again, despite looking very sad in this picture. But what does the future look like? How do you help success in your organization? First, you need to make the tools accessible. Make the tools as easy to install on your laptop as possible. You want developers to use the same tools that you're using. Make it easy for them to do so. Create wiki sites, create automated installations that give you all the packages you need. Put some examples out there. Those investments are worth the time to do it. Connect with other thought leaders. Get people together. So Ross Clanton is helping to lead a lot of our automation efforts at Target right now. He and Heather O'Sullivan, who's another leader on the development side, put together our first ever DevOps days. We had over 100 people participate, thought leaders from across the organization, sharing some really cool stuff. Get those people together, leverage social media, connect those folks together, and you'll be surprised at the cool stuff that starts to come out of that. And as part of that, you're going to see reuse, right? As you share the cool stuff, you say, hey, I did this, look what it looked like. People are going to be like, yeah, I want that. I want to use that. Then the important thing is try and use the same terminology. And I think that's the other thing you'll see as you bring these groups together and you start talking about things. Every culture is different in your organization. DevOps, if I were to ask for a definition of DevOps, I'd expect I'd get a lot of different definitions from people in the room today. Use the words that work for your organization. It doesn't need to be DevOps if that doesn't work for your organization. Call it what you will. But find a shared terminology, because that'll make things go faster. And so leave you as a final takeaway. As a leader, be patient. You're going to make mistakes. Support your team. They're going to make mistakes. You need to create an environment where people can make mistakes and move forward. Ask for help. Don't feel like you have to solve this by yourself. There's a lot of folks out there that want to help you, probably at your organization, outside your organizations. We've been really lucky. We've even had folks like Rob Cummings able to come to our DevOps days, share a lot of their insight, which is really awesome. There's a lot of help out there. The community is really great, so I'd encourage you to leverage it. But if you leave with one thing today as a manager, put the team first. You have to enable the smart people. The smart people is what matters. They're the ones doing the heavy lifting. The engineers in this room, you guys are the ones making the awesome. So I'll leave you with one last thing. Hopefully this tune, you'll have a hard time getting out of your head the rest of the day. But good luck. That's all. Thanks.